In 1500, Christopher Columbus stood on the deck of a ship bound for Spain, not as a hero, but as a prisoner. Iron shackles bit into his wrists. The man who had claimed a new world for the Spanish crown was returning in disgrace, accused of tyranny and incompetence. He refused to let anyone remove the chains. Columbus did not discover America. He died believing he had reached Asia. His calculations were catastrophically wrong, his governance brutal, his legacy soaked in blood. Yet his 4 voyages permanently connected 2 hemispheres that had been separated for 10,000 years. He was not the first European to reach the Americas, but he was the one who made the connection permanent and irreversible. Genoa in the 1450s smelled of salt, tar, and ambition. Christopher Columbus grew up in a cramped house near the harbor, the son of a wool weaver who expected him to learn the trade. But the boy watched ships disappear beyond the horizon and wondered what lay past the edge of the known world. By his early 20s, Columbus had survived a shipwreck off the Portuguese coast, clinging to wreckage until he washed ashore near Lagos. He settled in Lisbon, married the daughter of a Portuguese nobleman, and gained access to charts and navigation logs that most sailors never saw. He studied obsessively Ptolemy, Marco Polo, Pierre Dailly, and became convinced that Asia lay only 2,400 miles west of the Canary Islands. He was wrong by over 8,000 miles, but that error would change history. Columbus spent nearly a decade begging for ships. The Portuguese king's advisors examined his proposal and dismissed it. Their mathematicians correctly calculated that the distance to Asia was far greater than Columbus claimed. He was rejected in Genoa, in Venice, in England. Spanish nobles laughed at the Genoese dreamer who demanded titles, percentages, and hereditary governorship of any lands he discovered. But Queen Isabella of Castile saw something others missed. In January 1492, Granada fell, the last Muslim stronghold in Spain. Flush with victory and religious fervor, Isabella summoned Columbus back. She would give him 3 ships, 90 men, and a chance to claim new territories for Christ and crown. On August 3, 1492, the Niña, Pinta, and Santa Maria sailed from Palos de la Frontera. Columbus kept 2 logs, one accurate, one falsified to show shorter distances and calm his increasingly terrified crew. By early October, men whispered of mutiny. They had sailed farther west than any European in recorded history. Then, at 2 a.m. on October 12th, a lookout named Rodrigo de Triana spotted moonlight reflecting off white cliffs. Tierra, tierra, Columbus claimed the reward for himself. At dawn, he waded ashore on a small island in the Bahamas, planted the Spanish flag in the sand, and declared the land for Ferdinand and Isabella. The Taíno people who lived there watched from the tree line. Columbus noted in his journal that they would make excellent servants. Columbus returned to Spain a hero, parading through Barcelona with parrots, gold trinkets, and captive Taíno, but his subsequent voyages revealed a man utterly unfit to govern. On Hispaniola, he established a brutal regime. Colonists who disobeyed him were hanged. Indigenous people who failed to deliver gold quotas had their hands severed. Disease, violence, and forced labor devastated the Taíno population. Within 50 years, they were nearly extinct. Spanish colonists sent furious complaints to the crown. Columbus was paranoid, incompetent, and obsessed with his own glory. In 1500, royal investigator Francisco de Bobadilla arrived to find corpses swinging from gallows in the town square. He arrested Columbus and his brothers and shipped them back to Spain in chains. Even after his humiliation, Columbus believed he was chosen by God. He compiled a Book of Prophecies, arguing that his voyages fulfilled biblical scripture and would fund a final crusade to reclaim Jerusalem. He convinced himself that he had found the entrance to the Garden of Eden near the Orinoco River. Ferdinand and Isabella stripped him of his governorship but allowed one final voyage. Columbus spent a year stranded on Jamaica, his ships rotting, his men starving, while he predicted a lunar eclipse to terrify local chiefs into providing food. Columbus returned to Spain in 1504, broken and ill. Queen Isabella, his greatest patron, died weeks later. Ferdinand ignored his petitions. The titles and wealth Columbus had been promised remained disputed. He spent his final years writing bitter letters, demanding recognition, convinced the world had betrayed him. On May 20th, 1506, Columbus died in Valladolid, likely from reactive arthritis complicated by years of tropical illness. Few noticed his passing. His remains were moved repeatedly, Seville, Santo Domingo, Havana, back to Seville, as if even in death he could not find rest. Columbus never understood what he had done. He died believing he had reached Asia. But his voyages triggered the Columbian Exchange, the transfer of plants, animals, diseases, and people between hemispheres. Potatoes transformed European agriculture. Smallpox annihilated millions. Enslaved Africans replaced dying indigenous populations. The modern world, with all its interconnection and inequality, began on that beach in the Bahamas. Columbus was neither hero nor simple villain. He was a brilliant navigator, a terrible governor, and a man whose miscalculations accidentally reshaped the planet. The chains he wore in 1500 symbolized something larger: the weight of consequences he never intended and never understood. He opened a door between worlds, and humanity has been living with what came through ever since. Subscribe to History. Scribe for more stories about the minds, leaders, and rebels who redefined their time and ours.